Ferrari's situation is spiraling out of control, and the most frightening thing is that it's no longer just about 2025. What was supposed to be a redemption arc for the Scuderia is now turning into a full-blown crisis, with new evidence that could completely paralyze its 2026 project before it even begins. After a chaotic Hungarian Grand Prix, where Charles Leclerc's race pace mysteriously disappeared and Lewis Hamilton was completely out of contention, the truth is beginning to emerge. And what it reveals is deeply worrying, because the problems they faced in Budapest were not isolated incidents. They were warning signs of a much bigger technical disaster that could leave both Hamilton and Leclerc stuck, frustrated, and trapped in a car built on the wrong foundation. Let's talk about what really happened in Budapest. Leclerc surprised the paddock with a sensational pole position on Saturday, beating drivers like Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris in tricky Q3 conditions. It looked like Ferrari had finally found the winning formula. But less than 24 hours later, that dream was completely shattered. Leclerc's race pace collapsed, his tires overheated, the car became unstable, and he fell back to finish off the podium. The reason behind this dramatic collapse was not a driver error or a bad strategy. It was something much more alarming. New evidence has emerged pointing to a last-minute technical change made by Ferrari that completely destabilized the car. And this is where things get really serious. It wasn't just about saving a race, but this change was directly linked to a development line that Ferrari was using to validate key components of its 2026 car. That's right. What happened in Hungary not only ruined Leclerc's weekend, it could have exposed a fundamental flaw in the very concept on which Ferrari is building its future. What we are about to discover goes far beyond a single race or a failed pit stop. We are talking about a problem with the suspension, the height of the car, and a development direction that could already be a dead end. We are also talking about tire pressures, FIA regulations, and a desperate attempt to avoid disqualification that ended in technical disaster. Worst of all, this could leave Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc completely defenseless in 2026, because Ferrari could already be on the wrong track, and turning back will not be easy. So buckle up, because what you are about to hear could change everything we thought we knew about the future of Ferrari. What happened at the Hungarian Grand Prix was not just a bad day at the office for Ferrari. It could have been the beginning of a much deeper technical crisis. What started as a sudden loss of pace in Leclerc's car has now triggered a domino effect of serious questions that go to the very heart of the 2026 project. And the more details emerge, the more worrying the situation becomes. Halfway through the race, Ferrari made the decision to increase the height of Leclerc's SF25 by inflating the tire pressures. At first glance, this sounds like a harmless adjustment, but in reality, it exposed a fundamental flaw in the team's entire aerodynamic and mechanical concept. Why did they make the change? Because they feared excessive wear on the plank, the wooden board that goes under the car, a critical problem that could have led to disqualification under FIA rules. This component cannot wear beyond a strict limit, and if it does, you're out of the race regardless of your position. That Ferrari had to take such a desperate measure mid-race suggests they were on the brink of disaster. But this wasn't just a crisis for Hungary. The rear suspension concept that led to this adjustment was introduced as part of the much-hyped upgrade package for Spa, and it was not only intended to resolve the inconsistencies of the 2025 car, but was also to be the basis for the development of the 2026 car. Ferrari had bet big on this new architecture, hoping to kill two birds with one stone, correct the SF25's instability, and validate the mechanical platform for the next car under the new and radical regulations. The reality is that the move backfired completely. When Ferrari increased tire pressure to avoid floor damage, it completely destroyed the car's performance. Leclerc's tires overheated, he lost grip, and the rear became uncontrollable. He went from leading to a lonely fourth place, almost 43 seconds behind the winner, including a 5-second penalty for defending himself from George Russell. But the loss of time was not due to the penalty, but to a car that could no longer perform. The car had lost downforce, mechanical balance, and tire durability, all because of a fundamental conflict between the height and configuration of the suspension. And this isn't just about Leclerc. If this rear suspension concept, designed by former Mercedes engineer Loic Serra, is fundamentally flawed, then both Leclerc and Hamilton are in serious trouble. Because Ferrari's entire 2026 platform, the wind tunnel data, the simulations, the CFD models, has been developed under the assumption that this concept was a success. Hungary proved that it could be the opposite. In Formula One, the direction of development is destiny. When you choose a concept, you commit resources, time, simulation hours, and engineering work. If that concept is wrong, you don't just lose a race, you lose months or even years. And with 2026 marked as the biggest rule change in modern F1, new power units, redesigned aerodynamics, energy limits, and minimum drag targets, there is no room for error. Ferrari wanted to get ahead by testing concepts on the SF25 in real conditions. In theory, it's a great idea, but when those tests start showing red flags, it becomes a nightmare. You can't trust your data. You can't trust your assumptions. And worse, you don't know how long you've been going down the wrong path. The impact is enormous. Ferrari is 299 points behind McLaren in the Constructors' Championship, a huge gap. They haven't won a single Grand Prix all season. Hamilton has only managed one sprint race victory in China, and nothing else. Mercedes, with all its problems, is already hot on their heels, just 24 points behind. Red Bull, despite its political turmoil, is beginning to recover. Meanwhile, Ferrari is sinking. Behind closed doors, the mood is changing. The engineers are frustrated, the drivers confused. Leclerc was clear in his lack of answers after the race. Hamilton, after another difficult weekend, was left speechless. The worst thing is that no one knows what to expect, because if the technical team doesn't have control of the problems, how can the drivers? The biggest concern is that Ferrari's entire rear aerodynamic philosophy could be compromised. The suspension and floor must work in harmony. If the car can't run low without destroying the plank and can't lift without losing performance, then the entire concept could be unstable. That would mean the 2026 car would need to be rethought from scratch. Not just tweaks, but a complete reboot, and the clock is ticking. Development for 2026 has already begun. McLaren is flying, Mercedes is rebuilding with Kimi Antonelli, and a Russell in great shape. Red Bull still has Verstappen, and Ferrari could be starting over while the others are already halfway there. For Leclerc and Hamilton, this is a nightmare scenario. The golden duo that was supposed to bring Ferrari back to the top could end up with a car that is fast on Saturdays, but a disaster on Sundays. And worse, one that lays the foundation for another uncompetitive era at Maranello. If the concept is abandoned now, there is a chance to recover. But every day that passes makes change more difficult, more expensive, and more politically painful within the team. That is why the events of the Hungarian Grand Prix have shaken Ferrari to its core. This was not just a bad race, it was a glimpse of a future that no one at Maranello wants to admit could be coming. And unless urgent decisions are made, that future could arrive much sooner than expected. That is the real fear, that what awaits Ferrari in 2026 is not a new beginning, but the continuation of a nightmare from which they still do not know how to wake up. Leclerc and Hamilton are no longer fighting just for podiums, but for a future that still holds promise but is slipping through their fingers. This was supposed to be the moment when Ferrari turned the page. Instead, they could be writing the first lines of another painful chapter. And if you're as impressed as I am, if you believe in Ferrari's legacy, or are simply fascinated by how closely success and failure coexist in Formula One, stay tuned. Because what's coming could change everything.